All right. Great. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the City of Santa Clara's Homelessness Plan Community Forum. We appreciate folks making the time to be here today, and we're looking forward to the next couple of hours together. My name is Joy, and I'm one of the facilitators for today's meeting. I'll be taking us through our first few introductory slides and providing some context on the planning process. I did want to flag that the slides and recording from today's meeting will be posted on the city's website soon after. And if we go to the next slide, I just wanted to quickly introduce our, is the slide showing up for you, Eli? Gotcha. Okay, cool. I'd just like to quickly introduce our home base team. So it's myself, Carla, Eli, Jesse, and Max. Home base is a nonprofit technical assistance provider providing assistance to the county and also the city of Santa Clara today. So our colleague Max, I wanted to highlight, is attending in a tech support capacity. So if you're experiencing any tech issues, particularly during the breakout portion of tonight's forum, please feel free to reach out to him. But for any other sorts of questions, you can feel free to reach out to myself, Carla, Jesse, or Eli. And next slide, I'll be taking us just through some short and sweet Zoom norms. So we'd love to see your faces today just to see who all is with us. And if possible, we invite you to turn on your video. If you have a question, please use the chat. We'll be keeping all attendees on mute for the presentation portions of tonight's session until we begin breakout room discussions. So at that point, you'll be able to then unmute and share within your small groups. As a reminder, the community forum will be recorded and later posted on the city's Homelessness Taskforce webpage. And if you are having any issues with Zoom, please feel free to chat one of the Homebase team or email us at cityofsantaclara@homebasecc.org. We ask folks today to be respectful of diverse perspectives and experiences. We wanted to plug that this is a public forum, so the space we're aiming to have the space be safe for everyone to share today. We want to emphasize civility, courtesy, and encourage everyone to engage in respectful discourse today. We may mute you in the small groups in order to cut down on background noise, also just as a heads up. But other than that, we're excited to hear your thoughts. And for the next slide, I just wanted to flash quickly to our agenda for today. We'll set you up with some context in the first half of our meeting with some introductions and purpose, an overview of the Santa Clara County Community Plan to End Homelessness, highlight the city's planning process, and give you more information about homelessness in the city of Santa Clara. Then we'll be very excited to hear from you all during our small group discussions, conversation cafe activity, and we'll be wrapping up and providing some next steps in the planning process for you all at the end of the meeting. All right, so we're going to start off today with some brief intros and welcomes. So if we flash to the next slide, we wanted to provide the city team with a chance to introduce themselves. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Adam. Adam, I don't think we can hear you. You might be on mute.
I think we may have lost Adam.
Okay.
Shall we?
Yeah, in that case, I'll pass it over to Jennifer.
Okay, hi, this is Jennifer Carvalho. I work in the Housing and Community Services Office, and I am here supporting the city team for the task force.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. And then we'd also like to have some of our elected officials introduce themselves. So that'll be Mayor Lisa Gilmore. Would you like to say a few words? I apologize. I just remembered that folks can't talk. So I'll just go ahead and recognize the elected officials that are with us today. We truly appreciate you all coming, and that is Mayor Lisa Gilmore, Councilmember Anthony Becker, and Councilmember Sudge Jane. So welcome and thanks for being here. And trying to see if Adam has joined us, and I cannot see his name in the list yet. So I'll just go ahead and introduce our task force members. We wanted to acknowledge this group of folks who have represented the community thus far, and a couple of our task force members will be helping out with small group facilitation later on. You'll be hearing more background on the task force later on in our presentation. And we'd like to thank the following folks for their presence and participation thus far. And as well, the group is very interested to hear from you all today. Okay, so our three main goals for this meeting are to share information about homelessness in the city of Santa Clara and the Homelessness Task Force, to engage in the community conversation about homelessness in the city of Santa Clara, and to gather input from community members for the task force and the city. I'm going to share a poll on the screen, and we're just curious to know, what is your relationship to the topic of homelessness in the community? And you can choose as many options as you would like, but mainly we're trying to get a sense of who all is attending with us today. So we'll give a couple seconds for folks to answer. All right, it looks like most folks were able to answer the poll. So I can see we have a lot of community members who are concerned about the impacts of homelessness here today, as well as some service provider partners, folks from local government, and folks with lived experience in the room. So we truly appreciate all of you being here and welcome you into this space, and we're excited to get started. Okay. So next we'll walk through the Santa Clara County Community Plan to End Homelessness and how the larger community plan creates some framing for homelessness in our area. So the countywide continuum of care has responded to homelessness by putting together a 5-year community plan. The county had convened a community plan work group and steering committee for this purpose. This group guided the planning process, which culminated in a final community plan to end homelessness, adopted in April 2020 after almost a year of planning efforts. Community engagement was a crucial part in gaining feedback from the community directly, and this consisted of stakeholder focus groups and interviews, lived experience focus groups, community meetings with city departments, and an open community survey with over 5,000 responses. Additionally, the Santa Clara City Council endorsed the plan in March 2021. On the next slide, we'll see that the 2020 to 2025 Community Plan to End Homelessness includes a comprehensive set of strategies and targets designed to reverse the current growth of homelessness and progressed towards the community's collective goal of ending homelessness in Santa Clara County. The plan is centered around the following 3 strategies on your screen. So strategy 1 focuses on addressing the root causes of homelessness through system and policy change, and it recognizes that homelessness is deeply entrenched in societal, economic, and racial disparities. So this strategy really prioritizes shifts in policies and priorities to create change and decrease homelessness overall. Strategy 2 focuses on expanding homelessness prevention and housing programs to meet the increasing need. Due to things like the rising cost of living and shortage of affordable housing, we anticipate folks that will still become unhoused over the next few years. And so this strategy focuses on building the community's capacity to ensure that we have a broad supply of housing and services available. Strategy 3 focuses on improving the quality of life and creating healthy neighborhoods for everyone. While we strive for long-term systematic change with strategy 1 and strategy 2, it's also important to focus on the housing crisis that we have at hand. So this strategy aims to rapidly increase temporary housing and shelter capacity, as well as basic needs and services in order to better meet the needs of folks who are currently unhoused and build connections to housing programs throughout the county. We do encourage you all to read the plan for more context, and I'll go ahead and share the link in the chat. And you can also find the link at the bottom of the slides, which will be available on the Homelessness Task Force website. So the goal ultimately of the city's planning process is to align the city's plan with the larger regional community plan and utilize the city's strengths to maximize impact on homelessness locally. The city plan will be a written culmination of the ways that the city can best support and share in the work being done system-wide. So currently, the city is developing a plan to reduce homelessness and its impacts. This plan will help to set goals and a roadmap for the use of city resources and for the role that the city will play in regional efforts. So this planning effort is focused on 3 key points, one being gaining input from the Homelessness Task Force and community. The task force is a driving advisory body, which is providing input on the city plan and community engagement process. So through events like this forum, focus groups, and accepting public comments, our team is currently engaging the community in providing feedback and experiences to inform the plan. Next, we focus on aligning with the countywide plan. So we want to keep in mind what county systems already exist and what resources are already in place. And we don't want to reinvent the wheel with this new plan, but we may want to make the wheel turn more smoothly. And next, lastly, we want to focus on the city's strengths within a regional effort. So the city of Santa Clara functions as a smaller city within the larger county. And so this plan is meant to specify what city resources look like and where the city's expertise and influence is the strongest in terms of meeting local needs. So this summary of meeting slide is just a means of mapping out where we are in the process. So far, the task force has met monthly and convened 4 times beginning in April of this year to discuss different topics such as services provided in the city, community engagement, outreach, and housing program design. And so right now we are progressing through the phases kind of in the middle of that list, highlighted in blue, hosting different focus groups and this community forum as part of the community engagement process. And next you'll see in green that we have 2 more task force meetings coming up at the end of this month and in September, followed by a public hearing for the homelessness plan. So the goal of this effort is to develop a City of Santa Clara homelessness plan by fall of this year. And we just wanted to highlight the role of the task force a bit more for you all. So as the first step in this planning process, the city put out a call for applications to the community in order to assemble a homelessness task force. This task force includes members and stakeholders who represent a diverse set of backgrounds, including folks who have experienced housing instability and have lived experience of homelessness. And throughout task force meetings, the group identifies what the city and county are already doing well, the gaps that exist in the current system, brainstorming solutions, and they also help to prioritize the actions that are within the city's capacity in order to reduce homelessness and its impacts. Once the task force concludes, home base, that's our team, will take the task force's feedback and work with the city to draft a plan for the city council to evaluate. The city considers the task force definitely a critical partner in the process of developing this plan. So now that we've provided some structure for this evening's meeting, introduced our key partners, and give you some regional framing with the county plan to end homelessness, as well as overviewed the city's process, I'm going to pass to Eli for more information.
Great. Thanks, Joy. So we want to spend a little bit of time talking about homelessness in our community, what it looks like, and to present some information, some data about that. And we hope that by providing some basic information, that will help give us all that shared ground level understanding of the topic that we're going to be discussing. I know that we're all coming in with different perspectives and different experiences of homelessness in the city of Santa Clara, but I want to make sure that we have this touch point of a common grounding and understanding, and also to help get a little bit of a picture of what homelessness looks like in the city of Santa Clara and in the surrounding community. So this is going to be another 30 minutes of presentation. I'm going to pause a couple of times to ask you all to share your thoughts on what you're seeing. And we thank you for your patience as we present this information to you, and know that the whole second half of this meeting is full-on discussion. We're going to be going into breakout groups, and we're really looking at that point to hear from you. What are you thinking? What are your priorities on this topic in your community? But bear with us as we go over some information. So I'm going to be covering some data about who is experiencing homelessness, and also some data about some of the main contributing factors to the rates of homelessness that we see in our community. And then I'm going to pass to Adam from the city of Santa Clara to review some of the city's current work to address homelessness and its impacts. One of the main sources of data I'm going to use, I want to give you a little intro to before we get started, because I'm going to be using quite a bit of it. It's the point in time count. And can I just get maybe a thumbs up, sorry, a thumbs up, a comment in the chat, a thumbs up in real life, if you have ever participated in a point in time count, because it's staffed with volunteers from the community. So it's very likely we've got some point in time count volunteers with us. I see a couple folks, see some thumbs up, see some head nods. Yeah, see some hand raises. Yeah. So the point in time count, it's a volunteer based and staffed effort that happens every other year in January. And it's a census, and also there's a service component. It's essentially a combination of a visual count of people who appear to be unhoused, experiencing homelessness, living outside, plus the number of people who are living in the shelters across the county. It's a county level count. And this typically happens every January on a single night or night and day, right? It's at one point in time. And it gives us a particular snapshot of how many people are experiencing homelessness and a little bit of information about who they are on one night in January every other year. So when I say point in time count, the data that we're looking at, this point in time count data, comes from that one night snapshot approach that is taken. So before I start going over the data, I just want to remind you all of the ways that you can interact. I love the emoji reactions. I love seeing your faces. Also, the chat is open for you. As Carla noted in the chat, you can put questions, you can post comments. We are going to try to respond to as many of those questions and comments as we can. Know that if for time we're not able to respond to your comment or your question, we're going to be saving the chat. We're going to be following, themes that we're seeing, comments that we're seeing a lot, and we'll take that both back to the task force, and we'll try to address those in future information that's put out. But yeah, please use the chat if you have questions or comments. So first, this is point in time information about rates of the experience of homelessness in our community. This graph shows the number of people who are experiencing homelessness on a single day and night in January in the years given, based on that point in time count data. You can see that the orange bars show the number of people in the county as a whole, and the yellow bars show the number of people in the city of Santa Clara specifically. And you'll note that there is no city level data for 2022. So because of the COVID-19 pandemic and for safety reasons, there would have been a point in time count in January of 2021 that was canceled because it was unsafe to do that level of large volunteer-based effort at that time in the winter of 2021. The 2022 count happened in February. We don't yet have the full reported data. All we have is the high level countywide total number of folks who are counted. And you can see just a slight difference from the 2019 numbers. As those 2022 numbers are rolled out and are made available, we can update anybody who's on the interest list or who's attending this meeting about that. So looking at this graph, is while you take a minute to look at the numbers, there's a few things I want to call out. So first, you'll see that, or actually not first, just the thing I want to call out is, I think for me, this graph reminds me that homelessness is, at the same time, it's both a very local experience and it's also a truly regional challenge, right? People are unhoused in this city, in the city of Santa Clara. They're living outside and in cars in the city of Santa Clara in our neighborhoods. At the same time, we know that in a place like Santa Clara County or even the Bay Area as a whole, right, our cities are right up against each other. People move between cities all the time to go to work, to visit family, to rent or buy a home in a different neighborhood, to visit a really good coffee shop, for all sorts of reasons on a daily, monthly, yearly basis, people move. So as we think about homelessness in the city of Santa Clara, we absolutely want to focus on solutions for this city, for its neighborhoods. But to do that, we also need to recognize what's happening across the county. And we need to recognize that the people who are experiencing homelessness in the city of Santa Clara in 1 year this is not exactly the same 272 people who are experiencing homelessness in the city of Santa Clara the next year. Many of them are, some of them are not. And so there is this movement that we need to recognize. Seeing some questions in the chat. Are there any estimate with the point in time counts as to how many people are housed but lacking security? It's a really great question. So Betsy is asking about people who are staying on a fringe couch or are at imminent risk of running out of rent money, people who are living in that unstable housing space. No, it's a great question. And the point in time count doesn't count those folks. There are some ways that I think we can get at that, and some of the data in the next section will speak to housing instability, but I don't have good solid numbers about that for Santa Clara. What is the city of Santa Clara percent population of the county of Santa Clara? Another very good question that I don't have an answer to at my fingertips. It's possible one of my colleagues could pull that up for us, but I don't have that number right now. The next, I do want to move on to the next point in time count data point. This is a response to a survey question that's asked about where each person was living when they most recently became homeless or started to experience homelessness. So this is, where were you living when you most recently lost your housing? We only have responses to this at the county level, not the city level, just because of the way the reporting happens. But I think this brings us back to the idea of homelessness as a regional challenge and a local challenge. That 81% of people who were surveyed in 2019 were housed in Santa Clara County before they lost their housing. At the other end of the spectrum, only 4% of people were living outside of California when they most recently lost their housing. This is remarkably consistent from year to year and pit count to pit count in terms of the percentage of folks who were Santa Clara County residents when they most recently lost their housing. And the next piece I want to pull from the point in time count data is about the top most common responses to a couple of survey questions that I think help us start to see part of the picture of why people lose housing and why people experience housing instability. So the data on this slide is all self-reported by people in response to these survey questions. The graphic on the left shows the top 6 most commonly reported causes of a person's current experience of homelessness. So as you can see, those top answers vary, right? Quite a bit. And they touch on many different aspects of life, from job stability to personal relationships to mental health and behavioral health. So simple data points like this, right, they can never really tell us the full story. And there are as many stories as there are people about how people lose housing. But this type of survey data, I think, does give us some insight into the diversity of the experience of homelessness, that there are many different life situations that can lead someone to lose housing, and that often it is multiple things, multiple factors co-occurring, right, that someone is facing at the same time. And looking at the graph on the right, we see the top 4 most commonly reported barriers to regaining housing. And we see similar barriers related to housing access and income showing up year after year in the pit count as the main barriers that people are reporting. Again, simple data points. This is not the whole story. I'm not saying that it is, but this trend in survey respondents identifying things like income and housing access as their main barriers, it really fits with what we know to be true about the housing market in this area. That's what we're going to get into in the next section. Okay, so my colleague Jessie has posted a response to the question about the city of Santa Clara population. I'm seeing some questions. So how does the point in time count define homelessness? It's a really great question. Yeah. The point in time count defines homelessness, generally speaking, as people who are living outside or in places not meant for people to live in, not meant for human habitation, is the federal language there. It can mean people who are living outside, like in parks or sidewalks. It can mean people who are living in places like sheds or a garage that hasn't been converted into a living space. It's just a garage. This can mean folks who are living in tents, in cars. It can mean people who are living in certain types of trailers or RVs under certain conditions. In some situations, an RV might be considered housed. It's a gray area, but vehicles generally are an unhoused location. And then it also includes folks who are staying in shelter on that night. So an emergency shelter, a hotel or motel voucher that's provided as part of the shelter program. Yeah. And Carlos, that is a great point. So I'm seeing in the chat, has anyone collected stories? Some of those stories that people have experienced. Stories are more impactful than pure statistics. Yeah, it's really true. That's not something that we've done for this project because we want to focus more on the discussion that you all are going to be having. But I know that there are some great resources that tell those stories that are available through the continuum, the local continuum of care. So if you're interested in that, we can share some of those with you. Okay. So this is one of the points where I want to pause, and I want to just do a quick check-in. And let's do this in the chat. Let's see if we can get a lot of, as many people as possible to give one short answer or a couple short answers to this in the chat. I'm curious as to, does this PIT data surprise you? Is this PIT data what you would expect to see? Or is there anything about the data that we've gone over in the last 3 slides that particularly jumps out at you or surprises you? Go ahead and share your thoughts about that in the chat. And while you all are thinking about that and typing, I just want to share that I've already had about 3 different people privately chat me offering to tell their stories in this space. Thank you so much to those folks who have offered. We're not going to do that now just for the sake of time, but I really appreciate the generosity in making that offer. Yeah, so I'm seeing some thoughts. Yeah, so I think surprise at the number of people that are local, wondering if this is an undercount. Is there any information on the age ranges? Great question. Yeah, what do we expect to see in the city of Santa Clara in 2022? Yeah. Yep, seeing data that sort of counterpoint to the idea that people come here from out of state. It's not surprising to see the data based on what we see in communities. So thinking we're undercounting certain populations. Yeah, so some interest in the primary causes data. The number is interesting, the barriers and causes are not. Okay, surprised that the homelessness overall in the city of Santa Clara has declined, at least compared to 2023. Yeah, great, awesome. Okay, thanks so much. There's a lot of responses and I'm loving it. I want to address a couple of pieces here. So information on age ranges. There is a full detailed report that comes out following each of these point in time counts that is available on a particular continuum of care or county website. When that comes out for 2022, if you're interested, we can share that out to you. Make sure you see that. But it is available publicly online, and that does have information about age ranges and such. Okay, great. So next, I want to go through some information about the landscape that we're in, the economic, housing availability, housing affordability landscape. And before we do that, I want to go over some of the jargon and terms really quick. So we're going to be using some concepts to talk about housing affordability and income. One is area median income. This is a federal measure that's used to estimate just an average income. There is an area median income estimate or a family median income estimate for each size of family, for a single person, for a 2-person household, etc. There's also, so it's sort of a relative marker. There's also a general area median income that is published, but the idea is AMI is meant to be average income, middle point average income. And based on whatever our AMI is for an area, there are different income ranges that are typically used in this field by the federal government, by local governments, by the state, et cetera, to talk about populations and income ranges. One is extremely low income, which is approximately roughly people who have 30% of the area median income or lower. Very low income is roughly 30 to 50% of that area median income. Low income is 50 to 80%. And then moderate income is 80 to 120% of the area median income. Anything above 120% is above moderate income, still a large category. The regional housing needs allocation is another piece I'm going to be talking about. The regional housing needs allocation is a joint sort of effort between the state Department of Housing and Community Development, which requires each region to do this process, and regional bodies. So in our area, it's the Association of Bay Area Governments, or ABAG. That's not the important part. The important part is that there's a sort of regional and state collaboration to come up with, every so often, to come up with some targets for housing production that are based on estimated population growth, income levels, etc. It's an estimate for each area of our state of how much housing at what level of affordability we would need to create in order to meet demand. And I do see Pilar's question about AMI for the city of Santa Clara in the chat. I'm wondering if I have a teammate who can follow up on that. Okay. So with that background, we'll look at income and housing costs and housing affordability in a few different ways. So this graph shows the average income that folks can expect for just a couple sort of representative jobs, compared with the amount of income it would take to rent an average unit in our community. Incomes here are given primarily as hourly wages, but I've added the sort of comparable what the annual income would be for the two benchmarks on either end, just to get a sense of the range we're talking about. The green bar here is the housing wage. Housing wage is the income that a household would need in order to pay the average rent for a unit in our area, if they were paying no more than 30% of their income for rent. That 30% of income for rent is sort of a nationally used marker of if you're paying 30% or less, you're not at all rent burdened or rent cost burdened. So that's the goal. This is an average, based on average like rental cost across all sizes of rental housing. It gives us a good benchmark though for different sizes of household. So the hourly housing wage also assumes a work year of 2,080 hours, meaning 40 hours per week, 52 weeks per year, with no unpaid days off. So we know that looking at this, a two-income household, for example, where one income haver is a retail salesperson and the other is, for example, a medical assistant, right? Their incomes combined, if we assume that they both work 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year with no unpaid days off, they're not quite at that average housing wage. They're making about $95,000 annually, and that is below the average housing wage. So they're very likely paying more than 30% of their income for rent, meaning that they're cost burdened. Another way of looking at this is looking at housing affordability is looking at how many units are there in a community that are affordable. So the left side of this graph shows for extremely low income, very low income, and moderate income families, approximately. Per 100 households, how many units are available? So per 100 extremely low income households in the county of Santa Clara, there are 32 units of housing that they could pay for in an affordable way. And looking at it the other way, on the right-hand side, we see that of folks who are extremely low income households, 71% of those households are severely housing cost burdened. And severe housing cost burden means that they're paying at least or over 50% of their income in rent. That's a huge marker of housing instability, right? So if we're talking about folks who are housing unstable and we know that housing is likely to be an issue, severe cost burden or paying over 50% of your income for rent is a big marker of that, because that leaves a much smaller portion of income to cover other necessary things like food, transportation, childcare, healthcare. And it leaves those households very vulnerable to unexpected or crisis expenses, whatever those may be. And the last way we're going to look at this sort of potential environmental causes of homelessness are the regional housing needs allocation. So as I said, the regional housing needs allocation is an estimate of how many units that are affordable to which income bands, income groups, does a community need in order to meet the expected population growth and income changes that are projected based on census data and other information about a community. These RHNA numbers are specific to the city of Santa Clara. This is not county level. It's broken down at the region, at the jurisdictional levels. This is city of Santa Clara. And this was the most recent, the 2015 to 2023 targets that were set. So RHNA targets are not development targets for the city. The way that RHNA sort of plays into what the city's role in a community is the city plans in the general plan, the housing element of the general plan. They need to plan in a way that's going to support the development to meet these targets. So we can see that as of the end of 2021, because we're not done with this period yet, or it's not the end of 2022 yet, but as of the end of 2021, we can see that the city of Santa Clara, as a community, in the geographic area, there's been a lot of housing created, right? Which is fantastic. More housing is good. And the majority of the new housing that's been permitted during this time frame since 2015 is for that above moderate income range. And it looks like it's a lot harder to get, to see housing created in the community, to see housing permitted and created for the very low income, and moderate income ranges. And there is a housing need there that it seems like it's more difficult to meet. So as we look forward to the 2023 to 31, this is now forward looking from about where we are now. This is the projection of the number of units that would need to be created in the community in some way in order to meet population growth and to meet the current demand as well. Okay? So we see that the need, or the target across the board, the targets have gone up, and the targets for very low income and above market rate have both increased quite a bit. But we also know that historically, and this is not just the city of Santa Clara, this is everywhere. It's just much harder to see that growth in very low income units, and low income units and extremely low income units, right? That's where it's really hard to see that production of residential units. And so this higher target is representing a real need. And it's going to be a challenge that we're going to have to face as a community to try to get there. Okay. All right, I'm seeing a lot of great conversation in the chat, and I want to absolutely respect and value it. I'm not going to read it out because I think you all are communicating just fine without us, but I'm definitely seeing some threads of like there's a lot of recognition, a lot of understanding of the disparity in incomes, the wide range of incomes that we see in the community. We see the area median income increasing significantly, and we also see that there's always people in the community who are in those extremely low, very low income income categories that continue to struggle to access affordable housing. At this point, I'm going to pass to our colleague Adam from the city of Santa Clara. And Adam is going to take us through, now that we've gotten a picture of or perspective on who is experiencing homelessness and what some of those underlying contributing factors might be. Adam's going to give us another piece of the picture, which is what are some of the things that are already going on and already being done in the city of Santa Clara.
Thanks, Eli, and good evening, everybody. Adam Marcus, housing manager with the city's community development department, or the Housing and Community Services Division. So the next few slides, we titled them as strategies. So we're trying to sort of get in the mode of thinking about what is our plan for homelessness. And that's something that you're going to hear about more later in this meeting. But in the vein of things we're already doing, there are already some strategies that are in action right now and that the city has been working on for several years. Again, not enough, but lots of great work. So I wanted to take you through that a little bit. The first strategy, I think one of the most important strategies, although it is a longer term strategy, is to build more affordable housing. And as we've seen in the chat, what is affordable housing? And I'd like to make the distinction that as the median income goes up, we have to think very carefully about how we prioritize what type of affordable housing we need. So if 10 years ago, low-income housing was what we called housing that housed somebody who works at a grocery store. Now that the median income has gone up, and in some cases, incomes haven't gone up as much, in some cases, we have to think about very low-income housing and extremely low-income housing, especially when it comes to people who are either not employed or who are not fully employed. So it's important to think about the way we talk, the names, the categories that Eli mentioned. So extremely low income is an important topic when we're talking about solving the homelessness issue and preventing it. Many of you are aware, several years ago, the county voters approved Measure A, which was one of the most significant things that could be done to increase the amount of housing available, both with supportive services and just deeply affordable housing. The target of that funding measure was almost 5,000 units, and they're well on their way. The county is well on its way to using up all of that funding and reaching that goal. So kudos to the county and all of the cities around the county and the developers who have all been partnering and working hard to make good use of those dollars. Here in Santa Clara, some of you may be aware of our most recent and our first permanent supportive housing development at the large scale is the Calabasas Community Apartments, which just opened this year. It includes apartments with supportive services and case management. So it's considered sort of the more permanent solution to affordable housing, or sorry, to homelessness. We have several other projects. These projects range from about 80 to 150 apartments each. So we have several others that are in construction. So some of you may be aware of the Agri-Hood, which is not necessarily homeless housing, but there's some deeply affordable units there and some units set aside for seniors. Kiefer Senior Apartments just closed and just began construction. That'll be about 80 new apartments for seniors at very, very deeply affordable levels. And of course, the Monroe Apartments are also under construction. So there's really a lot of different types of affordable housing at different levels, at different depths of affordability, serving different groups within the larger population. Next slide. Some of you may also be aware of the Bella Vista Inn, which is currently under construction and being renovated to allow for 64 transitional apartment units for people who are awaiting permanent placement in supportive housing. And that is using the state home key funding. So the city did not need to subsidize this at all. The developer and the county were able to really take advantage of a new state program, much like several other cities in the county are doing. and really going after that funding and bringing it here to our county. This project will eventually convert into supportive housing. It'll a phase 2 will add some more units, getting it up to 120 total units. Again, with case management and supportive services. Next slide. We also partner. Strategy number 3 is our tenant-based rental assistance program, which is funded through our federal entitlement dollars. And so we are working very closely with Abode and the Bill Wilson Center, and they administer the program on behalf of the city. They provide financial assistance for a limited period of time so that clients can stabilize, do what they need to do to get their income back in place, to secure childcare, to flee domestic violence, and to sort of start over. But it's not intended as full-time housing, so it's really kind of like a voucher, and it's meant to be temporary until people on their feet. So that's another tool in the toolbox. Strategy, and next slide. Strategy number 4, again, the city does support the homelessness prevention system, which is a partnership between many agencies, as you can see here. None of these agencies are actively providing services in Santa Clara, apart from the Salvation Army, and they are, they are getting back in touch with this program. A lot of their services are run out of their San Jose offices, but people are using the system. They are going to San Jose and Sunnyvale to access these organizations to get temporary rent assistance and emergency, for emergencies. Next slide. And of course, this is kind of a catch-all slide because I know we got to move on. There's a lot of things that the city does. I can mention a few more things that the Community Development Department does, but I do want to give a shout out to the other departments. The police department has a great outreach team that's out there every day, working directly with unhoused residents and addressing some of the issues that arise. There's the Parks Department and the libraries also are very much frontline in addressing some of these needs. In all of these cases, city staff are trying to connect people to the best possible resource, whether it's getting them to be assessed so that they can then enter the kind of the queue for housing, or getting them connected to the right service. So some of those services that the city directly funds are landlord-tenant mediation, tenant education and counseling, fair housing programs through Project Sentinel. We have several organizations that assist survivors of domestic violence. We do help support the county in its efforts to provide permanent supportive services. So the county provides housing and the city helps pay for some of the case management services. So there's a partnership there as well. We do offer mobile showers and laundry once a week through our partnership with We Hope, and many others. I won't go into them all now. Next slide. And with this, I'll hand it right back to Eli. Thank you.
Yeah, and I get to pass the ball to Carla, who's going to introduce our small group discussion activity. But before I do that, I'm going to be greeting, and I'm going to say, hey folks, you did it. You got through the first hour presentation on the background we wanted to give you. We appreciate you sticking with us. And I am personally very excited to hear from you all in our breakout groups. Take it away, Carla.
Thank you so much, Eli and Adam. So like Eli said, we're shortly going to be moving into our more discussion-based activity portion where we're going to be breaking out into smaller breakout rooms, which we have already kind of created on Zoom. And like Eli said, we're very excited to hear from you all today. And the smaller breakout rooms will really be an opportunity for you to have a conversation with your fellow community members about homelessness in the city of Santa Clara, sort of your concerns and what you think the city should be doing about the issue. And we're going to be spending about 40 minutes in the small group. So just keep that in mind. What we're going to do right now, before we start into the breakout rooms, is if you do need to use the restroom or stretch your legs or just generally take a break, because I know we've been sort of, like Eli said, presenting for about an hour now, please use this time to do so while we go ahead and create the breakout rooms and kind of finalize those. We will meet back up here at 6:35, promptly at 6:35, where I will start to explain the small group discussions, and we will go from there. And in the meantime, while folks are taking a small break, we are going to be trying to get answers to some of the questions that are in the chat. So kind of stay tuned for that as well.
And actually, while we sort out the breakout rooms, and while you all can stretch a little bit, I am going to scroll through the chat to call out some questions. So I'm seeing a question about mobile shower and laundry. Is that question been answered, or is that still a current question? I think there's an interest in hearing more about mobile shower and laundry. What's the current status? How often does it go? Where is it utilized?
Hi, Eli. This is Jennifer. So yes, I did
Great.
do offer a brief response. Basically, it's every Monday from 9 to 1, and the We Hope sets up on Bassett Street near the corner of George. It is advertised on the We Hope website, and that is the current location where they are offering services.
Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Jesse, are there any other unanswered chat questions you've seen that we want to call out?
There was one question about, I don't know, Jennifer or Adam, if you all wanted to take this one, but there's a question, or we can follow up with folks afterwards, a question about the profitability of building new low cost or affordable housing compared to higher cost or I guess market rate housing.
I mean, I can try to reply. I guess I'm not sure what's meant by profitability. Generally, affordable housing won't get built unless there's a subsidy, because the rents don't pay for the cost to construct and operate the building. So there is that. I mean, no matter what kind of building it is, you need to operate it. You need to pay people to work in the building and maintain it. And then if you have supported services, that's a lot of additional cost that generally comes from the county to pay for having a case manager who usually is assigned to between 10 and 15 people at a time. So it depends what kind of housing you're talking about. If it's housing without services, I would assume it's pretty comparable, and it's just a different system. All developers take a developer fee in order to operate as a business. But generally those are moderated by the rules that are set by the different funding sources like tax credits and bonds. So I hope that helps to answer your question.
Thanks, Adam. I think there was one other question too about the Measure A units that you were talking about. Someone was wondering which sort of income categories those developments would fit into.
Yeah, Measure A has changed a little over the years, but I mean, its primary focus is on deeply affordable, extremely low income supportive housing. So below 30% AMI, I believe, but they have allowed for some developers to have some flexibility so there can be more creative projects that incorporate or sort of integrate that deeply affordable housing with other types of housing that's, higher income levels or that don't require supportive services.
Great, thanks. I think we are all caught up on the questions in the chat. Folks have any other questions, feel free to pop them in now. I think we've got another 1 or 2 minutes before we're going to pop folks into the breakout rooms.
All right. We can give it just, oh, we do have a question in the chat now. Is there a reason that the We Hope doesn't work on other days and in more areas?
Yeah, I can answer that. The We Hope is, the city does have to pay for the service, and so this was meant to be a pilot. So it's really just a function of, they do other service in San Jose and nearby communities. So it's really just a function of how, what the need is and where it is and the funding that's available for that.
Great, thank you, Adam. If folks still have other questions, we'll make sure to, either follow up or take note of your question. And we will be providing our home-based email address as well as our phone number. And so there will be that point of contact there if we don't get your question answered tonight. But for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and move to our discussion portion of the night. So welcome back to anyone that stepped away briefly. We're very much looking forward to hearing from you all, and we want to let you know that the facilitators, the groups, the breakout rooms that we're going to be doing are going to be facilitated by home-based staff as well as city staff, and also a few homelessness task force members that are actually here today to help kind of co-facilitate those rooms. And a lot of what the facilitators will be doing is taking notes on your input and your feedback so that we can share your input and feedback with the task force as well as with the city as we continue this planning process. So if you could move on to the next, thank you. So I'm going to go over the steps of the activity very briefly with you all. Do not worry about memorizing this or feeling like nervous that you can't remember, because once you're in your breakout room, your facilitators will go ahead and give you more detailed instructions. So don't worry there. So the first step will be to break out into small groups. So you won't have to do anything for that step. Zoom, basically, once we launch the breakout rooms, you will just be placed in there. And so you won't need to do anything. For our second step, you're gonna introduce yourself when you're in your small group. This will be brief, about a minute or two for each person. And as part of that introduction, you can mention what kind of brought you here to this meeting today. For our next step after that, we're gonna have a discussion about what the city should do to reduce homelessness and its impact, how homelessness in the city has impacted you personally, and what sort of, based on the discussion of what you all believe the city should be doing more of, sort of how should the city prioritize these things that we're talking about, right? And then lastly, we will all get back together. In our small breakout rooms, we'll share key takeaways. And then the last step will be to report out to the larger group. So that's sort of the steps of the activity. If we could go to the next slide. So as my colleague Joy had mentioned, this is a public forum, and so we want to make sure that this is a safe space for everyone. So I wanted to talk about some group agreements that we're going to use to ensure that the small group discussions are going to be a safe space for all community members to really speak from their own personal experiences and feel comfortable sharing their thoughts. So some of these, the group agreements include civility, maintaining courtesy at all times, having an open mind, listening and respecting all points of views, accepting, so suspending judgment as best as you can, curiosity, seeking to understand rather than to persuade, discovery, questioning assumptions and looking for new insights, sincerity, speaking from your own personal experiences, right? And brevity, going for honesty and depth and not going on or dominating the conversation. So the bottom line is that everybody's coming in with different lived experiences and perspectives, and we want to honor that. And your facilitators in your small groups will enforce these group agreements. And so just keep that in mind. If someone in the small group is disruptive, you will get a warning, but then if you continue to be disruptive, you will be sent back to the main room of, which is this room here. And you have the option of remaining in the main room until everybody comes back to the main room so you can listen to the rest of the community forum. Next slide, please. All right, so it's almost time for us to get into our breakout rooms. Before we do that, I want to let you know that for whatever reason, if you lose connection or something technical happens on your end and you log back into the meeting, our colleague Max is actually going to be in the main room and he can help guide you back to your breakout room in the case that does happen. So any technical issues otherwise, feel free to message one of your facilitators if it's happening while you're in the breakout room, and your facilitators will introduce themselves once you're in the room so that you know who they are. So we will go ahead and launch the breakout rooms, and we will see you all in about 40 minutes. So around 7:20, we'll all come back for our larger group discussion. Hey, welcome back, everybody. I know that you might have gotten kind of cut off from what you were saying. I know in my group we were still kind of discussing, so we apologize if that did happen, when you all were coming back. And I think we do have everyone back at this point, pretty much. So thank you all so much for participating in the discussion. We hope that you were able to have enough time to really delve into some of the things that were on your mind. So what we're going to do is have you all share in the chat some of your biggest key takeaways from your group discussion, or some of the things that are on your mind about your group discussion, or things you might have wanted to say and you didn't get to say. Go ahead and throw those in the chat. Those will all be recorded, like we said, and we'll take those with us as we continue this work. And the reason I say that first is because I know it takes a while for folks to type in the chat. So do that while we do this next part, where we're going to have some of the facilitators from each of the groups kind of share out generally what their group discussed. So I can go first since I'm already talking. You know, my group members, feel free to type in the chat if I missed anything or if there's anything else you wanted to share. So our group really talked about many things. So we kind of started our conversation acknowledging that, you know, one of the root causes of the issues is that there's not enough housing in Santa Clara for everybody. And then we also talked about some other kind of issues that come up with that, right? So we had folks share, you know, mental health is a huge issue. There are folks out on the street right now that are unsafe, that are unable to get around. And so that's an issue as well, right? Not only keeping your eyes on the long-term solutions, but also kind of what are we doing about folks that are on the street currently? Mental health was something that came up a lot. We talked a lot about folks being resistant to seeking mental health treatment, to seeking drug treatment, and sort of what that looks like for folks. I know that folks shared some personal experiences of theirs and their personal concerns about some of the things that they've seen in their community, a lot of drug abuse, fires that have broken out in encampments. We had actually Sergeant Dager on our team, on our group, who talked about the outreach that PD does, and also some of the things that they've seen and folks, you know, not being able to really, you know, accept help or you know, want help for things that they need. And we did talk about that there were some changes in law that folks felt like, you know, didn't really encourage people to kind of go the diversion route of going to rehab or going to treatment when they do run into criminal legal system issues there. And then lastly, I wanted to acknowledge that we also talked about, you know, housing first as a model, and that, you know, life is already hard, even when you do own a home, and how how being out on the streets can make kind of exacerbate all the issues that we talked about, your mental health and everything. Let's see, did Jessie want to go next to share, kind of summarize what her group talked about?
Sure, thanks, Carla. We had a really great discussion about some potential gaps in services. Folks talked about, you know, the need for wraparound services, the need for supportive services as folks are getting into housing, and how important those are for stability once folks are getting housed. Some conversation around the older adult population and an increase in the number of older folks that we're seeing, you know, falling into homelessness in the community, folks that, you know, are experiencing an increase in their housing costs, and they're on a fixed income, and you know, they lose housing as a result of that, and how that is sort of a different demographic than we've seen in the past. Folks also talked about the need for affordable housing development, and you know, neighborhood opposition to those types of developments being a really big barrier there, and also related to that, sort of a need for community education, and sort of understanding, you know, who is homeless, and understanding, you know, that folks are part of our community. I think we also heard a little bit about sort of folks really wanting to know more about what's out there in terms of resources, and how we can help folks, and sort of seeing that there isn't that much to be able to connect folks to, you know, when you see somebody who's living on the street and wanting to help them. So I think that's a sort of quick summary of our group takeaways. I'll pass it over to Eli.
Can I go next? Yay. So I'll go really quick, and my group, I'm going to be as quick as I can, but I could spend the whole, a whole 20 minutes talking about all the great ideas you had. So I apologize for my brevity. So Housing First definitely did come up, specifically in the context of the success that was reported in the news in Helsinki with a Housing First approach. But a lot of the conversation started with, and our group started with, a feeling of a great desire, a concern for human beings who are unhoused in the community, and a great desire to help, and a recognition that, people who have not had that experience we just don't know. Like, I don't know who is unhoused in the community. I don't know what the solutions are. I don't know how to help, and I don't know what the next step should be. And so that really brought us to a lot of discussion about that community education piece. Community education for folks who are concerned about their neighbors and want to help. Also community education for folks who don't understand maybe the number of people who are really close and housing unstable, and how easy that is, and what the causes are, and to try to address some of that fear and pushback. And then a couple of other things that were mentioned were the importance of things like financial education, and using the city housing element as a tool, and that planning process as a tool to address housing instability. And also, the last thing I'll say is sort of calling back to what is it possible for the city to do, and to start there, right? To start what's in the power, the ability, or the wheelhouse of the city, and what can the city most impact. And I will pass to Hillary.
Hi, this is Jennifer. I was the note taker, so she was
Thanks,
going
Jennifer.
to have me go ahead and share. So we had a great conversation, great group. Definitely, a great mix of people that, from lived experience to people who make decent money, own homes, but everybody is empathetic and everybody wants to help. It's just a matter of what can they do to help. There was a lot of stress on the sense of urgency. There has to be more immediate things that can be done to help people that need help, because looking at projects that are touted to be built in 2030, that doesn't, it'll help in 2030, but what about now? And obviously, building a new development from scratch is not going to happen tomorrow. So one of the ideas that came out was converting motels, for instance, on El Camino, to some type of temporary interim housing, because it's already an existing building, so there's less time and effort that would have to go into doing that. A concern about, it's great that the city collaborates with the county, and we need to continue to do that, but also, is there a way that the city can do more immediate help for the people that are here in the city? Because once they get referred into a county agency, they're competing for the same services and the same help with everybody else in the county that needs help. And so just kind of a sense of desperation, and that there's a number of people here in the city, especially a lot of older people, who are literally rationing meals, rationing, medication, and literally don't know where they're going to be able to live if anything happens and they, have to leave their current residence. But just a lot of a great conversation about, people wanting to help, just not really sure how to help. And, but definitely the sense of urgency was critical, that, we need to have things that we can do now to help that person that's in front of us, and not just, refer them to some housing program that might get them housed in a few years. So yeah, I think that kind of sums it up. Sorry if I missed any of your ideas, group 2.
Thank you so much. Joy, did you want to share anything?
Not too much else to add. I think one thing that folks were really appreciative of in our group was that they saw a lot of their neighbors, so the opportunity to make those connections in community was really important, as well as, you know, community education and greater visibility of what resources are in the community for folks that are unhoused, and where the most effective places are for folks providing services to go and outreach to folks, and as well recognizing the high cost of living and overcrowding leading to other issues. So, you know, obviously overcrowding, too much folks to house, the streets are overpacked with cars, and that can lead to some safety issues as well in folks' communities. So that's what we talked about in our group.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much for all of the messages in the chat. Like we said, we might not, be able to respond or acknowledge them, but we appreciate them and we see them and they're recorded for us. I know that we're over time, which is, a good sign. It means folks had a lot to say, but we did want to sort of wrap up today's meetings by kind of showing you all what's kind of next and giving you the opportunity to, subscribe, be involved, receive updates if you're interested. So at the end of this month, Thursday, August 25th, we have our 5th Homelessness Task Force meeting. We, talked a little bit about the work of the task force earlier in this forum. So if you would like to join, you're able to register for that or the 6th meeting, which is at the end of September. At the Santa Clara ca.gov/HTV, HTF, which is the city's homelessness task force webpage. Now, just a little bit about the task force meeting. So tonight's event was really focused on allowing folks to break out into the smaller groups to have discussions. The task force meetings, folks from the community who are not on the task force have kind of a different way of being able to engage during those meetings. And that is by listening to what the task force is talking about, and then you're able to write in the Q&A feature on Zoom. So it's a little bit different. There's not like that discussion between the community members, but it's still a great place to go to hear what the task force is discussing, hear the task force's ideas and questions, and you're always able to write in the Q&A. We do try to keep up with the Q&A during the task force meeting. And then lastly, once the city plan has been drafted, there are going to be public hearings on the draft of the city plan, and that's going to be taking place in the fall. We have not announced or set dates yet for that, but if you do go to this city's homelessness task force webpage, you're able to subscribe for updates there, and then you should be getting updates on when those dates are announced. And as always, if you have any questions or concerns or additional thoughts from tonight or just at any point, please feel free to contact the home base team at our email or phone number that's listed there. So that's City of Santa Clara at homebaseccc.org, or you can call us at 415-788-7961, and that goes to our whole team, and we're pretty responsive on there, so please feel free to reach out. So thank you all so much for coming. We really enjoyed the robust discussions, and we look forward to additional discussions in these upcoming meetings. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much for all of your input. It was really great to hear from you all today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Bye.
all.
Thanks all. Have a lovely evening.